great. And I mean, we talked beforehand too. It's like we start to wonder with some of these programs, like as coaches start to get fired, like Georgia Tech, are they fixable? Because they just fired Jeff Collins. And we talked about Boise State, did San Jose State break Boise State in 2020? Is that something that we should like go back and think about? So we'll find out some things. It's kind of like the time where like, the seat gets pretty fiery for a lot of coaches. One such I guess I'll talk about it later in my games to watch. But yeah.
I was actually going to mention something about Jeff Collins during this, right? So he was on year 4 of a 7-year contract that was worth over 20 million. So a pretty good chunk of change. They had high expectations for him, right? I hope you would, at least for $23 million. He certainly had some low lights, right? They had their first loss to an FCS opponent since the 80s. They had their first home shutout. Not in a good way, right? They were shut out at home since the 50s. I believe that was in his first year. No bowl appearances, still haven't won a bowl game since 2016. There were some positive aspects though, right? Maybe not on paper, but you could feel like the general feeling of the program, at least in the off season, felt like it was going in the right way, right? Didn't really feel that way this time of year, but at least definitely a player's coach. I'm not too attached to Georgia Tech football, but from everything I've seen, seemed like very much a player's coach, very well liked. Omar, you think this was the right move? And if it was, do you think this was really the right time to do it? What do you think on that? They fired their athletic director too, by the way. So this was this
Oh
is your
wow, I didn't
house.
know that.
So
Oh
yeah,
wow.
yeah, this is like a complete rebuild. It is not even a third through the season of the college football season. Really a good time to do that, or
Well, yes, because you mentioned lowlights, and I think there are many lowlights in the Jeff Collins tenure. And I can think about 3 at the top of my head. You mentioned loss to the Citadel the year after they switched from the triple option. You think about the 24-2 loss on the road to Temple. Jeff Collins' old team where the offense looked absolutely lifeless at Lincoln Financial Stadium. You also think about 73-7. I mean, Clemson versus Georgia Tech, and they were more competitive this year against Georgia Tech. But you just look at the talent too. Like you talk about the offseason night, like Jeff Collins can recruit his tail off for sure. He absolutely can. But the problem was when you're not winning games with guys like Jeff Sims at quarterback or Jahmyr Gibbs at running back, and you can't keep Jahmyr Gibbs. It's just like a compound list of things. And if you ask me, I think you should go back to Tulane. Go back to Temple. I keep mixing up the T schools in the American, but he should go back to Temple, honestly. And that's kind of the same conversation people are having right now, I guess, with Brian Harsin, who's finding himself on the hot seat at kind of at the same time that Andy Avalos of Boise State is finding himself on the hot seat, excuse me. Where these coaches, maybe their ceilings were at their old schools, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with running a Temple program that has potential to run the table in the American, especially in the new look American. Nothing wrong with that for Jeff Collins, but I just think I'm happy to see them not succeed after switching from the triple option. Nothing against Georgia Tech fans, but I'm just a triple option guy.
I think my biggest surprise, you mentioned that at recruiting, and I could have our friend at PFF, Connor McQuiston, correct me on this if I'm wrong, because I know he does a lot of analytics on recruiting. But I feel like Georgia is one of those states that, hey, you always know California, you always know Texas, you always know Florida. Georgia has always had that top tier quality, the state of Georgia, but then recently there's been a lot more depth to it, right? You see Georgia and Ohio specifically be 2 of those states that are producing not only the top level athletes like Georgia, Texas, and Florida, or excuse me, California, Texas, and Florida, but you're also seeing the depth of the talent in those states. And so it's surprising to me that in such the most condensed part of Georgia, North Georgia, right around Atlanta, you would think he'd be able to figure that out. You think he'd be able to recruit. I don't know if you remember, this was a year or 2 ago, that whole feud with UGA over Georgia is doing these recruiting photo shoots that talk about Waffle House and being in Atlanta. It's Atlanta is not in anywhere that close to Athens even, right? They're hey, Atlanta is our thing. And Jeff Collins really went all in on that and doing interviews with a a Waffle House cup on there. I don't know if you saw any of those, but it's like, hey, we are really the true 404 or whatever the area code is there, right? So like he went all in on the recruiting aspect where that was kind of his personality. It's just like he hasn't been able to put it together. And then look back, I mean, I watched his defense at Florida, right? We know he can do some X's and O's stuff. So it's surprising to me. We'll see where he turns out. Certainly, I think he'll go back. I mean, maybe to a lower program than Temple for now, right? And then like work his way up back again to something like that. But we'll see. It's the Jeff Collins experiment was certainly interesting. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it on a positive note.
Yeah, you just reminded me of another low light. The loss to Northern Illinois at home game that I was at.
Oh yeah.
So I guess no, like I said, like I'm not trying to just it's memories are coming back, from being in the area and seeing I guess Georgia Tech last year, but yeah, I mean, I guess on a more positive note, I guess Jackson, we can turn the page and talk about our HBCU Pigskin Showdown Players of the Week and to watch for the following week. And I think I guess I'll start with mine because I think you went first last week. So my one guy in a HBCU landscape filled with players that just had great performances. One senior that stood out to me was one. Sorry, I got to pull up my sticky note. Forgot I have a touchscreen. Was Samuel Jordan out of Lincoln University and Philadelphia. And this Lincoln University team was a team that went 1-9 last year, and they only scored 61 points. Now, Lincoln has doubled their win total, and they scored 62 points through only 4 games on the season. So a great improvement. And Samuel Jordan looks to be at the head of it. In his last game against Johnson C. Smith, Lincoln, Samuel Jordan had 12 carries for 32 yards and two catches for 77 yards, including an electric 72-yard touchdown for over 100 yards all purpose. He's a senior. You should be able to see him in the HBCU Pigskin Showdown, which you might use as a launching pad to the HBCU Legacy Bowl. Lincoln did not have a participant in either All-Star game, so this would be a huge boom for a program that has struggled since they resurrected football after 40 plus years of dormancy. They resurrected football in 2008 and have not had a winning season yet, but maybe Samuel Jordan can get some of that NBC Peacock shine come December at the end of the year and for a resurgent Lincoln program.
And I just want to say, just because they haven't had a winning season since they, kind of revamped right in 2008, that doesn't mean like there isn't any talent on there. We see like, just watch the NFL draft, man. You see like plenty of players drafted on like bad teams and end up doing great, and vice versa. Maybe they're not drafted high, but they end up doing really well in the league, right? So absolutely. So certainly possible to have a lot of, or maybe not a lot, but some talent on bad teams. I'll go ahead and go with my guy, Jarvion Howard, the running back from Alcorn State. Man, he's a Syracuse transfer that's just been lighting it up so far this year, but particularly caught my attention. And Omar, I want to thank you for mentioning to me as well in the win versus Arkansas Pine Bluff. And 23 attempts, just sort of 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. Omar, what do I say for running backs? If you can't catch, you can't play. It's very established that he can play, but the 1 reception for 2 yards just really put the icing on the cake to get over 300 all purpose. So want to shout out Jarvion Howard. He had a little bit of trouble in the Tulane game, but every other game other than that, at least 20 carries and at least a touchdown. So he's been killing it this year, and hope to see him continue light up this season. And then obviously in December at the HBCU Pigskin Showdown, if he's lucky enough to get elected, right, or picked out. So.
Yeah, so I got to say this. I mean, with Jarvion Howard, I guess first on your point with Lincoln, I guess struggling since they resurrected football. And at the end of the 2019 season, they did have a Hula Bowl invite in Ivan Myrtle as a defensive back who played in the Hula Bowl, which I mean was just a great accomplishment for the program. Just so at the state it was in. But with Jarvion Howard, this is a Syracuse transfer. I'm getting chills thinking about the backfield with Sean Tucker and Jarvion Howard if Jarvion Howard had stayed. But I mean, it's great that Howard is getting playing time out there at Alcorn State. And I got to say now too, like it just feels like the SWAC East may be a crash course for Jackson State and Alcorn State to decide it, because I believe that game is on the final weekend of the of the FBS season. So, that's the week before Thanksgiving weekend, and that's usually not a heavy week for yeah, exactly. It is. It's not a heavy week for great games because the SEC plays their cupcake games. A lot of schools are preparing for rivalry week. So you might see game day out there in Mississippi for the Soul Bowl. And especially if Alcorn State keeps playing like that, Alcorn State, they did go to the 2018, 2019, and 2015 Celebration Bowl. So Fred McNair is running a great program out there.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, absolutely, Noah. Some great guys to watch. I love the Hula Bowl invite. I know you said both All-Star games. I just want to make sure for everyone listening, Omar is talking about, I believe, both HBCU All-Star games, right? Is that my?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Just making clear. Obviously, the Hula Bowl invite, right? Hula Bowl, Hula, Reese's, Shrine Bowl, all of those are gonna be a little bit different. But yeah. We'll go ahead and go. Do you want to go with our players that we're watching upcoming this week, or do you want to kind of recap a little bit of our week 4 performances?
I wouldn't mind recapping first and then hitting the players to watch.
You got it. I'll go ahead and go with the guy. I think this is like one of our first Division II players that we've talked about on here, but a guy who really caught my attention, Jada Byers, the running back for Virginia Union University, a D2 school. And the win versus Virginia Lynchburg, 31 attempts, 161 yards, and 3 touchdowns. On the season so far, 7 receptions for 68 yards and another 2 receiving touchdowns. He's also been on a little bit of kick return duty as well. Man, the attempts is what really gets me, because he has 104 attempts on the year and a 7.5 yards per carry. Like, it's a big sample size, and it's also like a very productive yards per carry, like a very productive average, right? Really, his main skill that really like pops off is just his contact balance, man. He's 5'7", 180. He is by no means a power back, but the yards after contact is there, even though he doesn't have really the size to like lower his shoulder and run you over, right? So what does that mean? His contact balance, and you can really see it on there. He's doing awesome stuff. Looking forward to seeing him finish up the season strong.
Yeah, so for those of you at home that are unaware of D2 football and their awards, the Harlan Hill Trophy is the Division II football's highest honor. So we're looking at a guy, and I guess I'll channel my inner Chris Collinsworth. So here's a guy that can take home not only the Harlan Hill Trophy, not only the Black College Football Hall of Fame, that's a mouthful, Player of the Year, but also the Harlan Hill Trophy, because against the number 2 team in Division II, Valdosta State. In week 2, Jackson, I know you're from Valdosta. It's in your email. He ran for over 300 yards against that team. And that is a phenomenal program out there in Georgia, in Southern Georgia. So, Jada Byers is the real deal. I hope he breaks 2,000, to be honest with you. I'm not sure what his on pace for stats are, but he was averaging over 200 yards until last week. I'm kind of surprised that Virginia Lynchburg, an unaffiliated program, held him to below 6 yards a carry. But yeah, no, I'm excited to see where Jada Byers ends up in the awards.
I did see the Valdosta State on his game log. Definitely disappointing. If you're unfamiliar, man, go back and watch the Football Town series on Valdosta football from the NFL Network, just to get you familiar. It's great stuff. But yeah, man, I'll move on to my next guy. I think we're just rehashing about Jada Byers that whole time. You go with your first guy, rather.
Yeah, Jada Byers could have been my guy. So my first guy too. This was a huge weekend for the borderland. Not only did you have Utah beat Boise State for the first time ever, but for the first time in 11 meetings, New Mexico State beat Hawaii. And our friend Brock's not going to like this. Our good friend Brock of Midnight Sports Today is not going to like this, but I'm picking Star Thompson. And I got to say, in Las Cruces, if you're a fan of the movie A Star is Born, you would have been a fan of Star Thompson's performance. 11 carries for 144 yards and a touchdown against New Mexico State. He could have stayed in longer, but New Mexico State, they're kind of looking like that mid 2010s kind of rushing attack with Minnesota that Jerry Kill had with Minnesota, with Mitch Leitner playing quarterback, and just the running back by committee. Well, I mean, that's just a team. I mean, I love the Jerry Kill hire because, you know, you play, I guess, conservative football, run the ball very well. I mean, I guess that's kind of the strategy you need for programs like New Mexico State. And I wouldn't be surprised if he builds a bowl team. But Star Thompson, 11 carries, 144 yards and a touchdown for New Mexico State in their first ever win against the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. So go off. It was a party. It was a party in the Borderlands this weekend, you know.
Absolutely, man. I'll go ahead and go with my next guy, Cole Snyder, the quarterback from Buffalo. Really been steadily improving all year, right? So he did have a rough start on the road against Maryland. Then he gave your team, Omar, and your team, Holy Cross, all that they could really handle. A couple
Yes,
picks
sir.
against Coastal Carolina. But then Saturday, man, against Eastern Michigan, he put up 297 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and then on the ground, another 2 rushing touchdowns, right? So a big 50-31 win versus Eastern Michigan. Since we're talking about games that already happened, I really want to shout out the Buffalo defense as well. They not only gave up any points beyond the 10 minutes and 38 seconds left in the third quarter mark, so like just 5 minutes into the second half, right? Gave up no points, only 1 play in Buffalo territory allowed by the Eastern Michigan defense. And think about it, that was a tight game. It was like, I believe 30-31, something like that. And then they really came back and either broke the tie or like ended up winning by 3 scores. But like, what a performance by this Buffalo defense. So yeah, they killed it. And with the diversity of the receiving core for Buffalo too, man, he's already thrown to like 10 different, just in the Eastern Michigan game alone had like 10 different receivers with the catch, like throwing it to everyone. You have to cover. Think about game planning as a defensive coordinator, right? You look at, I know something that, pretty much every defensive coordinator does, right? Hey, let's look at the targets so far this season. How many targets is the X getting? How many is the Z getting? How many is their slot? I mean, you're going to have to like start charting for like the 3rd string slot receiver if you're playing Buffalo, because like, it's just, Cole has just been passing the ball around to everyone that gets on the field, which is awesome to see. So yeah, Buffalo as a whole, but particularly, obviously, they couldn't have won that game without Cole Snyder and his services and passing the ball in, running the ball on the ground. So
Yeah, and that was a really surprising result with like everything that you mentioned with Buffalo not really being competitive against Maryland, losing to the Holy Cross, the Fightin' Satyrs of the Seven Hills, the Holy Cross Crusaders. But and then Eastern Michigan went on the road, not just the middle of the day, but late at night to beat Arizona State and send Herm Edwards on his way. Right or wrong, as some allegations came out this week. But yeah, like really, I mean, and that just shows the balance in the MAC, honestly. Like the MAC, you just cannot tell with the MAC, like the MAC cannibalizes itself every single year, but that's just a testament to the parity the league has, and just like I guess the resources are, I guess, evenly spread because the footprint isn't, it's not a huge footprint, so you don't have a monopoly of a certain area for each school. I mean, all schools are really competing for the same players, and it shows, recruiting wise. So, I mean, the MAC is always exciting. I mean, it's hard to tell. You can't really put a finger on who the favorite is like at the end of September. So, I mean, I can't now. But staying in that great conference for my next guy, I'm gonna go to the defensive side of the ball. And Akron came into this Liberty game on the road as 28-point underdogs. They only lost 21-12 to that Liberty Flame squad, but leading the defense was Bubba Arslanian, who had 16 tackles for Akron on the year. He's got 43 tackles. I really like what Joe Moorhead's building out there with Akron. I mean, if you're a Mississippi State fan, I don't think he was given enough time at Mississippi State. Really redeemed himself at Oregon this past year. With the offense, we made Anthony Brown. I mean, showed Anthony Brown's true talents, honestly. Something that Steve Adazio failed to do in that scheme in Boston College. But Bubba Arslanian, the leader of a strong defense, and I think this is the Akron team that could play spoiler in the MAC East. I mean, snag a couple games. Like, this isn't the terrible Akron team of like 2019, 2020, you name it. Like, this Akron team is competitive, ready to go, and I think Joe Moorhead also, along with as well as Jerry Kill, could make a bowl team out of this this upstart program.
yeah, absolutely. And we're about to get into Maction, I believe, pretty soon, right? Which never hurts for the ratings, because I don't know how how many people are watching just regular, like choosing to watch MAC football over Power 5, right? Since I believe most of it is on ESPN Plus at this point. So yeah, looking forward to get into that as well. I'm gonna go ahead and go with my next. I don't want to say player because it's just a unit as a whole. I gotta shout out the Louisiana Monroe backfield on this one. Andrew Henry, Malik Jackson, and then Chandler Rogers. I know not in the backfield technically as a quarterback, but man, did a lot of damage on the ground. Combined 37 carries for exactly 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Helped get their first win versus Louisiana, not Louisiana Lafayette, since 2017 and really since the pre-Billy Napier era in Louisiana. So awesome to see by that. It was kind of running back by committee. They really split the carries pretty evenly. Especially if you count Chandler Rogers, I think it was 11, 12, and 13 carries that they each had. But awesome stuff that they did, and looking forward to seeing. Think about it, right? To really like control the clock, you need to run the ball. And man, it's hard to run the ball if you've got like just one running back that's taking like 25, 30 carries. So, hey, let's keep guys fresh. Let's keep them out on the field. Let's play a little, 21 personnel too, to kind of mix it up, right? And not have the defense not know who's getting what. So awesome stuff to see by Louisiana Monroe, and hope to keep it up because, man, if you don't have a star running back like a Derrick Henry or something like that, why not do running back by committee so that you can really keep guys fresh out there and keep controlling the clock?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, so this was really like a huge statement game for both Louisiana Sunbelt teams. For Monroe, you want to see them maintain this consistency because last year they had that huge upset against Liberty at home, but they couldn't sustain they could not sustain, that momentum. Now this year with this big win against Louisiana, I mean, we'll see if they can sustain it. And if Louisiana Monroe reaches 6 wins, they got to be a shoo-in for the New Orleans Bowl. They've never played in the New Orleans Bowl. You want a Louisiana team. The Superdome is going to look great in that maroon and mustard yellow gold. And I mean, like, better. I guess, like, I mean, it's similar to creamsicle. So I mean, so maybe Jackson, maybe you might have some rooting interest there. That Monroe's yellow is similar to creamsicle.
I probably have some more interest if you want to go back to our Disney crossover podcast.
Oh gosh.
Staying at Port Orleans French Quarter, grabbing some beignets and having a watch party. Instead of Princess and the Frog, let's watch the New Orleans Bowl. I'm still saying, still throwing that idea out there. So.
All right. Yeah. I mean, you heard the man. I mean, but yeah, on the other hand, for Louisiana, this was not by design. I did not expect to be talking about Rice, Louisiana from a couple weeks ago to an extent, but it's like it just feels like this is a rebuild year for Louisiana, and that's okay. That is okay. In this new world of college football where players have easier access to transfers, easier access to follow their coaches, that is totally fine. Louisiana is still they're in a position to succeed. Like, honestly, I'm not sure how much Billy Napier took to Gainesville with them, Jackson. Of course, you would definitely know way more than I would.
So the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, for Louisiana fans, because at first when Billy Napier was hired by Florida, if you don't follow me on Twitter, I'm extremely active on Gator Twitter, just the whole UF community, right? And we were kind of joining with the Louisiana football Twitter community of, man, this Billy guy is awesome. You're going to love him, Gator fans. He is the best. Enjoy. And then the assistant coach announcements started coming out, right? And of course, he took Patrick Toney. Okay, tough loss. We lost our play calling defensive coordinator, but okay, I get it. And then Montreal Johnson, the Sun Belt, almost said rookie of the year, freshman of the year, transferred. And then Osiris Torrance, the offensive lineman. And then like I said, the straw that broke the camel's back was when literally the head videographer for Louisiana football got hired by Florida, and what I can only imagine is a pay raise. And it's oh my gosh, Billy is taking everyone. So there definitely was, I don't want to say some animosity, but an understanding a little bit between Billy and Louisiana. We thought there was going to be a little bit more of a succession plan for whenever he did leave Louisiana. But Louisiana, they had the guys stay who stayed, and they've really tried to make it work with that, right? And been somewhat successful so far. You can still see so many similarities of like things that Billy Napier brought to, because I follow Louisiana football on Twitter or on Instagram, and I'll see stuff. I'm like, man, Florida's putting like that exact same thing out there. It's just like in orange and blue instead of red and black. So you can still see the footprint of Billy Napier in that program, and it's interesting to watch. But yeah, they're making it work. We did really take like a ton of guys from Louisiana. I'm not gonna lie, like they were left pretty like shallow with that. So some Louisiana, one particular Louisiana football podcast had some choice words about it. I'll put it that way. But yeah, I forget how we even got on this topic, but
Yeah, I mean, just said that it looks like a rebuild for Louisiana.
Yeah, it absolutely is a rebuild. Yeah, it absolutely is a rebuild for sure.
So I mean, one team that may not be in a rebuild is the Miami Redhawks of Ohio.
I thought you were gonna say the Miami Hurricanes for a minute. I was like, man,
no.
That Middle Tennessee State loss, man.
Yeah,
sorry, I had to bring it in at some point.
Yeah, like I mean, yeah. So this Miami team had a good weekend. They beat Northwestern 17-14, and there was a bit of ribbing on Twitter. So there's some trolling on Twitter where they said that they were Chicago's college team, which I thought was hilarious, despite them being in Southern Ohio. But leading the charge to them was Keon Mosey, who had 21 carries for 171 yards as the Redhawks beat Northwestern 17-14. Their passing game was, I wouldn't say non-existent, but not efficient. 7 for 19, 62 yards. So Mosey really took up the burden of the offense and really did great against Northwestern. And Northwestern, they've lost to Southern Illinois already, and now it's lost to Miami. I mean, I don't know if Pat Fitzgerald's on the hot seat for all he's done for this program, but I mean, it's just discouraging. You'd think that Northwestern would bounce back after a year like that. But that 2020 pandemic year with the Citrus Bowl win, it's looking more and more like a Mickey Mouse year.
I think the win versus Nebraska really set our standards very high for Louisiana. It wasn't that long ago that they were in the Big Ten championship, right? And then we see them go to Dublin. They get the win versus Nebraska, especially in the fashion that they wanted. And because it wasn't just the onside kick, like don't get anything wrong. Like Nebraska did a very good job coming back in that game, getting themselves back into that game. It wasn't all Scott Frost, despite what all the meme pages tell you. And so that set our expectations high. We've seen the disaster in the context of a Power 5 team like Nebraska that they should be. And obviously there's a reason why they didn't wait, a month to save $6 million to fire Scott Frost. It was that bad. So we had high expectations coming in after week 0. And then we've seen, maybe Northwestern isn't that good. And it's difficult. And this loss really kind of, I think, solidified those fears for some and what we suspected for a couple of weeks now.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, like you said, the expectations were high because we really didn't know anything about anyone. But I mean, it just looks like Nebraska's on its descent. Just looks like a bad Big Ten West team beat another bad Big Ten West team for lack of a better term.
But it was in Ireland, so it was fun, and they put it before all the other games. So.
Oh yes, sir, absolutely. I mean, yeah, but really not much to say beyond that. I mean, I guess Jackson. I don't know if you had one more guy.
I do not.
Okay.
Go ahead. I can move on our players to watch, which
I have a bonus.
Just mentioned. You have one more?
I have a bonus, and this is a follow-up from last week because on this podcast, I told you that Fordham, Ohio would be a shootout. And it was. This was definitely a better quarterback battle than Tua versus Lamar that we got in week 2 of the NFL season, as Tim DeMorat went 27 for 35, 461 yards, and 7 touchdowns to the Fordham Rams. And Curtis Rourke topped his performance against Florida Atlantic with 537 yards and 41 to 50 passing and 5 touchdowns. Like, I mean, I am really beginning to think that that the Patriot League will have two teams in the playoffs, Holy Cross and Fordham, because it is going to be a crash course where both teams are going to meet in Worcester, and one of those teams is going to win the Patriot League and one of those teams is not. Another team will probably get it at large. But I mean, Tim DeMorat, if you don't know this man's name already, through 4 games, he has 1,805 yards, 22 touchdowns in 4 games. Like I think I saw a stat somewhere that said he's on pace for 61 touchdowns this year. So if he ends up dropping 50 touchdowns in FBS season, give this man Heisman votes. He's playing in New York City. He's playing in the biggest media market. Give him Heisman votes like right now. I mean, Fordham needs to start a campaign to get our man Tim DeMorat a Heisman campaign because he is playing in New York City, the biggest media market of the world. Like, forget Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge's chase for 61 home runs. Let's get Tim DeMorat's chase for 61 touchdowns.
By the way, it was like some BS that ESPN kept cutting off like the Texas game and really all their college football games to like force us like to watch that. It's like the Bird Box or whatever that movie is, scene where like they're forcing her eyes open. It's like that's what ESPN was trying to do with us to freaking baseball. Yeah, I want to say, Omar, I think I can speak to this a little bit more since I am in Yonkers, just outside of the city, right? I could take one wrong turn and like see the skyline. People do not care about college football here, man. It is just like not a thing as much as I wish it was. I miss being in Texas every Friday night and Saturday. I went to the grocery store here last Friday night. In Texas, it's kind of a combination. You're usually watching college football, you're watching high school football, right? I went there. I was like, don't you people have lives? Like, what? Why is it so crowded here? Like, you people should be like watching football, like normal people. But yeah, no, not a thing up here, unfortunately. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and go with I can kind of kick off our players to watch. I'm going to go with Xavier Smith, the wide receiver from Florida A&M. Like I said, tough year to start for some of these guys on the road in North Carolina where they competed for the beginning. I remember like really saying, hey, watch out, like Florida A&M is going to compete. Ultimately kind of fell apart in the second half. And then again, that game for sure. But since then, 16 receptions for 214 yards and 4 touchdowns, so not bad. They've got a game versus Mississippi Valley State this week at 6 p.m. I know MVSU hasn't had the season that they were hoping, but neither has Florida A&M, honestly, at 2-2, right? So I'd like to see some consistency, stay on pace at 8 more catches, 100 yards, maybe a couple touchdowns in there. So either pad the stats or just show us that, hey, these past 2 weeks weren't a fluke.
Yeah, so you mentioned Mississippi Valley State. I mean, that should be a very competitive game. I guess a competitive game because, I mean, you look at the score of Jackson State, Mississippi Valley State, 49-7. The Jackson State Tigers won. But, I mean, Mississippi Valley State ran wild on Jackson State's defense. I mean, they had trouble they had trouble defending the run against Mississippi Valley State. They allowed 181 yards on the ground. And then, I mean, the passing game needs work if they're going to keep up. But then again, I mean, why the score is so high, and I've seen complaints about this, is Coach Prime left his son in Shador too long, which frankly I think he did. There's honestly no reason for Shador Sanders to be throwing 51 passes and 49-7 blowout. Like there is no reason for that. Like that is just ridiculous.
There's also no reason to have Justin Herbert out there without his left tackle. They were trying to like go down the field with like 20 seconds left, down 28. It's like, man, just like call it a day. Don't risk your quarterback who's coming off of a rib injury anymore. Like I don't know what's going on in the past couple of weeks. We've seen a couple of questionable decisions as far as quarterback play went into blowout, but yeah, man, that it needs to stop.
Yeah, 51 passes, really? Like really? There is no reason for him to be throwing 12 less passes than Josh Allen did this Sunday. Like, no reason for that. But yeah, I guess for my first guy, I'm going to stay in the FCS level. And Fred Payton. This is the guy, if you're a Coastal Carolina fan, Georgia Southern fan, you remember Fred Payton started a game during the 2020 season for Grayson McCall. Fred Payton's having a solid year himself out there at Mercer in Macon, Georgia. 891 yards, 11 touchdowns, 0 interceptions for 3-1 Mercer, who had their only loss to Auburn, 42-16. So they played well as they could against Auburn. But Mercer's never been in the FCS playoffs. The SoCon looks open this year, and they play 0-4 Wofford this week. A 4-1 start for the Mercer Bears would be huge for that program. And Fred Payton, you might have a dark horse Walter Payton Award. How cool would it be to have Fred Payton win the Walter Payton?
It would, man. That would be awesome to see. That would be That'd be awesome. That'd just be meant to be, right? The script writers would have a busy day with that
Oh
one.
gosh.
I'm gonna go with my next guy, Rishi Rice, the wide receiver from Southern Methodist, SMU. Honestly, the receiving leader in college football right now, right? With 565 yards over 4 games. And he's only doing it with 34 catches. So, like, an amazing average. 6'2", 203 pounds, really has that explosiveness where he can overtake guys in coverage and just it's not always just mossing guys. I don't want to say that because it's not like overwhelming physicality. It's just like using, and it's not like over the top speed like Scotty Miller or anything like that. It's just like short area quickness where he's like really can manipulate guys. And it's really impressive to watch. And this is a program that we've seen. They developed Emmanuel Sanders. They developed Danny Gray, a guy we talked about on the 49ers podcast we guested on. And then Reggie Robinson as well. This is a program that's developed. I mean, no one's saying SMU is like wide receiver U, right? But it's like this is a group of folks school that's produced some talent over the years. So,
yeah, I mean,
Niner Nuts. Sorry.
Niner Nuts.
Yeah. Oh, I was blanking on the name, but Niner Nuts. Also a great podcast if you're looking for anything 49ers content.
Yeah, I mean, I'm waiting for Danny Gray to get more targets, for the Niners. But I mean, yeah, you mentioned that like Sonny Dykes did a great job with that program. It's now Rhett Lashey's program, but I mean, a couple of names you missed. I mean, like James Prochet, drafted by the Ravens. Trey Quinn, drafted by the Washington Commanders. So yeah, like it's great to see the lineage for SMU continuing on. And I mean, yeah, they got a huge game against UCF. You said, is it UCF they play against this week?
It is. Oh man, I forgot to write it down. My bad.
No, you're fine.
It's gonna be obviously play TCU last week. This is gonna be UCF on the road on Sunday. Actually.
Right, because of hurricane. So, yeah.
Some of these games: Florida, Eastern Washington, SMU, UCF. Really, all those are kind of getting pushed back towards Sunday. So.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So yeah, should be a great game with a lot of fireworks for both offenses. Next for my next guy.
We see like another like Jim McElwain, FSU or LSU and Florida kind of feud start because of a hurricane between SMU and UCF?
Dang, yeah.
Interest in that?
I should have known. If anything, it would probably be more between Eastern Washington and Florida, where Florida squeaks by Eastern Washington and Billy Napier ends up crying on the field about people from Eastern Washington, trash talking during a hurricane. You played yourself, Jackson.
Yeah,
you played yourself.
I walked into that one. That's my own fault.
But on that note, staying in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, Pacific. You have Jaden Ott for me, my next guy for the Cal Bears. Had 19 carries for 274 yards and 3 touchdowns versus Arizona last week. This year in the season, he has 463 yards on only 56 carries for 3-1 Cal. And Cal is an interesting program because they're going to play good defense with Justin Wilcox out there in California. They're going to play good defense. It's always been the offense that's been a hurdle for this program. And Jaden Ott seems to be the perfect guy. Like with that in mind, like you want to see him get more carries and be a workhorse for that program because I mean they kind of need it with the offense struggles and the defense they have. Cal is 3-1. I don't know how many people gave up on Cal after they lost to Notre Dame, but Cal is 3-1. They're very much alive in the Pac-12 North. And they play Washington State. Honestly, if Clemson had lost last week, I mean, I guess game day would have been at Wake Forest, Florida State, but California versus Washington State would have been a dark horse candidate for game day if Wazoo won. But that is definitely a game to watch out on the West Coast. And honestly, if Washington State loses, they're probably eliminated from the Pac-12 title race with 2 conference losses. Cal might still be alive because they still have Oregon State and Oregon still in the North, but just a huge game out west, and I don't think it's going to get the attention it deserves, honestly.
We're going to have to talk about that. There's going to be a lot to talk about concerning the Pac-12 race to their title game, right? So that's definitely something we're going to have to talk about on Bulls and Booze this upcoming Monday night. I'll go ahead and go with my last guy. Speaking of the Pac-12, Michael Penix, the quarterback from Washington, man. A guy that we've talked about a little bit.
Penix energy.
Thank you, RG3. Oh my gosh, wow, lots of RG3 commentary from this year. But I will move on. The junior from Tampa, Florida, man, putting almost 1,400 yards in the air, 12 touchdowns, 1 interception. Nothing really to speak of in the running game for him, but 0 sacks on the year, which is something that you usually see. Like if the rush yards aren't there, the sacks are, but we're not seeing either, which I mean, I'll take it, right? Big Friday night game versus UCLA at 10:30 Eastern. What I really find remarkable is that Mike has done this when he wasn't even announced to be the starter for Washington until like late August. Remember that whole like three-way competition between Sam Howard and Dylan Morris? It's been amazing what he's done so far, considering he just took control of this team despite all the hype that I know we've talked about him before, a lot of hype that he's gotten from previous years. So awesome to see him and hope to see the continued success against UCLA.
Yeah, I mean, again, this game was not on a Friday night. Game day would be there, I mean, but I think with this game, you can see as we later on in the season will shift to our Heisman talk and whatnot. If you can see kind of DTR switch out for Mike Penix in the Heisman race. If DTR is a huge game now, DTR is taking a while, and UCLA they've squeaked by a couple of teams, Bowling Green and South Alabama. But I mean, like they're still that's a 4-0 team. They're still 4-0. So they're still very much alive in the Pac-12 South. So a huge game. You kind of hate to see the Pac-12 doing this to their teams with these Friday night games, because the list goes on and on and on. Like 2017, you had USC lose on a Friday night and they ended up with 2 losses out of the playoff. In 2018, you had Washington State lose a game to USC and they ended up with 2 losses out of the playoff. Utah in 2019, Friday night game ended up with 2 losses out of the playoff. So you see a recurring trend here. And I mean, I hope that trend doesn't continue, but I just think the league needs better management, for that point. But yeah, so should be a great game. A lot of fireworks on a Friday night. What's not to love? For my last guy, I got App State. It was a tough week for Mountaineer fans. No really, I guess, cutting corners on that. But the defense has been sort of a weak point for the team. But there's a bright spot in Nick Hampton, 5 sacks, 5.5 TFLs for the Mountaineers. And this should be a great matchup for him, on defense, because they play the Citadel triple option team that has struggled this season. They only ran for 82 yards on 48 carries against Mercer. So Nick Hampton should be feasting out, on those on those slot back toss sweeps, on those pitches out on the edge on triple option. So Nick Hampton should have a big game for a motivated App State team. Yeah.
This is an App State team that usually when we see like college game day go to anything other than a Power 5 school is usually because they're having like unusually sustained success, and it's usually deeper in the season, right? It's usually we're at least pushing October, usually November when we see that. And it was interesting that they went to a Group of 5 school halfway through September hardly that already had a loss, and I understand they beat Texas A&M. It's still interesting to me, though, that I think this, like, we've given App State so much credit for the A&M win that, okay, maybe that was more of an A&M loss than it was an App State win, and now we're kind of seeing that, and now they're 500, right? So I'll move on. I hate to end on a negative note. I just think it's worth mentioning, especially for us college game day fans, that get a lot of college football reporting from these guys. So I'm going to go ahead and go with my did you have any more players to watch this week, or do you want to go ahead and move on to games to watch?
Games to watch. I got none.
You got it. I'm going to go ahead and go with Stephen F. Austin at Sam Houston State. It's going to be 3:30 Eastern on ESPN Plus. No need to watch Arkansas and Alabama, man. This is going to have all the offense that you could wish for. 3rd and 4th place in the WAC respectively, right? So kind of fighting for the chance to stay alive in there. Sam Houston State, one of the more successful programs outside of North Dakota State in the FCS. Stephen F. Austin, man, I'm sure you saw it, 98-0 victory this past week. I don't care who you're playing. I had never heard of the school. That is impressive because we saw Georgia struggle versus Kent State. We've seen plenty of teams that are dominant, should win by large margins. And we've never seen anything like that I can remember, at least, right? 98-0 is just insane. So Excited to see how they kind of respond to that. I can only imagine how exhausted the offense is still running out there, but definitely an exciting one to watch and at least keep an eye on. Like, how does how does Sam Houston State respond to being having a losing record after winning so much just a couple of years ago, and then Stephen F. Austin after an incredible week.
Yeah, so the reason I was so excited for you to say this because this is the last edition for the immediate future of a great rivalry. The two schools, the battle of the Piney Woods, Stephen F. Austin and Sam Houston State, they've met 95 times before. This will be the last meeting in the immediate future as Sam Houston State goes to Conference USA. So boo Conference USA and Conference realignment. This sucks. But again, all the more reason to watch some action, honestly. I mean, it's going to be there. If I could bet money on there being a pregame brawl, I definitely would bet on it. I think there will be a pregame brawl. I mean, because these schools are so close to each other. So very excited for that one. So for my first game of the week, I'm going to start off with the premiere of the greatest tradition in college football television. You got Ivy League Friday nights. The first game starts off with a bang. You have Dartmouth versus Penn. Penn is 2-0 after struggling last year in the Ivy League. They're fresh off a shutout against Lafayette, where they only allowed one rushing yard, of course, with sacks, but one rushing yard. And I mean, a 12-0 victory, hard fought 12-0 victory. Dartmouth, on the other hand, is coming off of an upset loss to Sacred Heart, a Sacred Heart team that lost to Lafayette and that has also lost to Morgan State, our friend Neil Boudreau's alma mater, and has not looked like the NEC champs, the Northeast Conference champs that they were. Dartmouth lost, but I mean, geez, their quarterback Nick Howard, that man can run the ball so well. He's the Colin Klein of the Woods of New Hampshire. He had 24 carries for 186 yards. You want to see him grow as a passer because he attempted less than, I think, 20 passes last year, being the running quarterback in Dartmouth scheme. So he's still improving as a passer. We'll see how much he's improved or if he will even need to throw against Penn, because having your quarterback run for 186 yards should do the job, But Friday night, ESPNU, Hanover, New Hampshire, Memorial Stadium, be there, be square.
And what a loaded Friday night of college football we have too. We have Tulane, Houston, two teams that we've talked about a pretty decent amount. San Diego State, Boise State, two Mountain West teams that are right at 2-2. It'll be interesting to see how Boise State responds. Washington, UCLA, which we've already talked about, and then New Mexico, UNLV, and of course, Ivy League Friday nights as well, because you need to spend all of Saturday studying. So that'll be awesome to see. I'll go ahead and go with my next game. My last two games are actually, I don't like doing this typically, but you'll see why. They're both Power 5 games. I think they deserve to be talked about. So the first one, I'm going to go with Texas Tech, my school, at Kansas State, right? Noon Eastern on ESPN Plus. These are two teams that are coming off of games that no one expected them to win, right? Kansas State beating Oklahoma and Texas Tech beating Texas in overtime. This Kansas State offense is definitely something I'm worried about. Adrian Martinez, the quarterback, obviously Omar didn't pass, ran for 148 yards and 4 touchdowns. When you have that also with Deuce Vaughn, a guy we've talked about, that is a really hard run game to cover between those two. In my opinion, looking at it from Texas Tech's perspective, right? So obviously control the line of scrimmage. Everyone knows that. I'd like to see, I remember during COVID, I watched a lot of film on Patrick Mahomes. And the one thing when he would take off and scramble that you couldn't do, the common denominator was you either blitz or you get pressure up the middle, like the A gap or B gap. So that's something I want to see. Don't try and get much penetration up the middle, right? Try and get those edge rushers around the sides, contain Adrian Martinez, and don't allow him to take off, because once that defensive tackle or that nose tackle gets up the middle and gets it where you put pressure on Mahomes, you would see him just scramble around the edge rusher, whether it's behind him or in front of him, and get a 20-yard gain. And that's something that you have to treat a running quarterback in Adrian Martinez's style. I think you have to do the same thing. So I'm excited to see that. Another player that Joey McGuire, the Texas Tech head coach, mentioned, Eli Higgins, who I was not familiar with, the defensive lineman from Kansas State. really jumping off the screen, not stat wise, but really if you put on the all 22, looking good, or at least so I've heard from people who know a lot more than me. So I'll take that.
Yeah, I mean, Texas Tech does look like a contender in the Big 12. I mean, the Big 12 looks open again now with Kansas State beating Oklahoma. Keep in mind that the top two teams will play in the conference championship game. So
No divisions,
no
just
divisions. Yeah. So, I mean, that could be a combination of so many teams that look like they are, in the thick of it. So, very excited for that one, too. I mean, you just wouldn't think like, you think about the old Big 12 of like our childhood, that's like a Big 12 South is Big 12 North team, you wouldn't think about like that. Like, it's even then, I think even now it still takes some getting used to. But I'm excited. It's funny that Adrian Martinez is the one taking the headlines and not Deuce. But yeah, no, you love to see it. But for my next game is a game that I've encouraged you to go to. One William Jackson Danner, Howard versus Yale at the Yale Bowl. This is Yale's first HBCU opponent since 1984, since the Reagan administration first term. And this will, I mean, Howard plays two Ivy League teams this year, so I mean, you'll kind of see, I guess, Howard sort of get used to the slower pace, I guess, play of the Ivy League in this first game at New Haven at the Yale Bowl. This game will be, as I look at the time, Yale lost week one, Yale lost week one to Holy Cross for their worst loss in 34 meetings against Crusaders, 38-14. They flipped they literally flipped the script, won 38-14 against Cornell this past week. The offense looked good. Nolan Grooms won 12-17 and Fish 12-17. And the receiving core looked good, especially one Mason Tipton, who had 133 yards and 6 catches. But again, Yale's only played 2 games. Howard's played 4 games. So you wonder if like the in-game experience will matter, even though Howard is 1-3. Howard played South Florida pretty competitively out of Raymond James. So there's that. But this game should be pretty good. I mean, I guess the New York City Metro is getting pretty familiar with Howard with their game at MetLife and now at Yale. But I think this game will be closer than the experts think. And I mean, Yale doesn't look as good as they have been in recent years. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that'll be definitely one to watch. Still trying to figure out the logistics on that, man. Hey, we'll see. We'll see. Definitely a possibility. If not, I promise you at least to be on one of the teams.
Jackson, just go, man. Florida's playing on Sunday, man. Just go.
Yeah, I know, man. I'm gonna have to choose between my two loves, Florida football and the Red Zone channel. So that's gonna be tough enough.
But Saturday's open. Just go to Yale Howard.
Quick side note that I want to go ahead. I want to throw it back to last week when we were doing our players to watch. One of mine was Asher O'Hara, the Middle Tennessee transfer who went to Sacramento State, obviously played versus Colorado State on the Mountain West Network. And what did I say, Omar? I don't know if you remember. It was a small sample size of what we had, but what we had was awesome. I just want to say the exact same thing applies to the Colorado State game. Small sample size, only 10 passes. The damage he did in those, though, 10 for 10, 71 yards, 1 touchdown, and another 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground. So I just want to kind of shout myself out there, I guess. I don't know. Asher O'Hara, man, he's not gonna be the air raid, but like what he actually throws is gonna be on right on the spot. So. Yeah, and I think Omar, being a West Point graduate, you're familiar with offenses that don't pass the ball much, but then don't have much success passing the ball either. So,
I am. And that actually, well, no, I don't think it's my next though. With my last game of the week, I mean the Commander-in-Chief's Trophy. The first leg starts this Saturday. You have Air Force versus Navy. Navy travels to Colorado Springs, and honestly, I think Kenny Amatolo's seat's gonna get even hotter if he does not beat Air Force in this game. And if it's a blowout like last year, the offense looked like last year's game against Air Force. Offense looked absolutely horrible. They had 36 yards rushing on 34 carries, 1 yard per carry. And even worse, the game was on CBS. This game's on CBS. I think Rich Waltz is calling this game next week. I know he's calling the Army Air Force game. Makes sense if he calls this one too. But I guess an awards dark horse I want to bring light to is Brad Roberts from the Air Force Academy. And this is the guy that has 465 yards in 4 games at the fullback position. on 68 carries with 7 touchdowns. So I mean, if Air Force makes some noise, like Air Force is a dark horse of the New Year's Six, I believe. If you see Air Force break into the Cotton Bowl, I think Brad Roberts should get some Heisman love. It's there. It's I know Top Gun is a film about naval aviators, but he plays for Air Force. The common American isn't gonna connect those dots together. They're gonna be like, oh, pilot, Air Force guy, bam, this guy should be a Heisman finalist.
Exactly. All you gotta do is get the sunglasses and it's good to go.
But yeah, on that note too. Sorry, my bad, Jackson. I wanted to add too that both of these teams, like this game, should I think you should take the under on this game because both these teams love to run the ball inside. Watched Navy's game last week against East Carolina extensively. They're beginning to run more wingback dives because they're having trouble getting the ball out on the edge. Their fullbacks are very capable. But yeah, so sorry to cut you off, Jackson. Just forgot to add that.
No, absolutely. It's where's the game at again?
Oh, it's at Colorado Springs.
It's okay. Yeah. I thought you said that. I just wanted to make
10
sure.
10 a.m. start time, local time. Yeah, it'll be a 10 a.m. local start just for the TV.
That's early. My gosh, that's early. Yeah. What's the phrase? Like 62-28, breathe it in, I'll suffocate by Air Force, right? So high elevation it's gonna be.
I don't know.
Oh, I thought that was a thing there at USAFA. I'm gonna go ahead and go with my last game, like I mentioned earlier, Power 5 game, Oregon State and Utah. Man, like talk about a game where you're gonna find out like who you are, especially where you stand in your conference. Oregon State coming off of a really heartbreaking loss versus USC at home, right? Like very, very difficult. I'm not going to say difficult to watch because no one could watch it because it was on the Pac-12 network. But no one expected much of Oregon State. And now they're really, if they lose this game, they're staring at 500 in the face because you have a road game at Oregon after this. And Oregon, I'm not saying Stanford is like the toughest place to play, but it's Oregon State. Like it's very feasible to think that they could win that game, right? And then you have Utah. Utah lost to what we now know is a bad Florida team, and their main hope really is to have no conference losses going into the USC game October 15th. So it's going to be tough. Utah, USC could potentially be a huge game, but if they I mean, Utah's been on a roller coaster this year, right? They had like that tough loss to Florida, and then they scored like 70 million points the next week. So I believe it was like Southern Utah, right? So it's like they've been on a roller coaster. Oregon State is coming off of a brutal loss. I'm interested to see how both these teams really respond and kind of how they where are the expectations for both these teams going into the Pac-12 championship later? Is that the goal for these teams? Is it just understood it's going to be USC and fill in the blank from there? I'm interested, like I said, to see how these teams will react to that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, and again, for Oregon State, I mean, I won't say playoff eliminator. For Oregon State, it may be a Pac-12 title game eliminator. Like, they may not be the front.
Absolutely.
They definitely won't be the front.
Two conference losses as Oregon State you're done. Honestly.
Not playoff, yeah, but I guess for the conference, in conference definitely would be an eliminator. Utah for sure. I mean, one loss, they could recover from one loss and then beat USC and have the tiebreaker there over the Trojans. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I shared the frustrations of trying to watch USC Oregon State too, and only being able to watch Stanford Washington. Last week on FS1, obviously not the better game.
I think it was Greg McElroy or one of the ESPN analysts that posted, like, I'm trying to watch USC Oregon State. Like, if he can't watch it, no one can watch it. So, just a shame there. But, I mean, the Pac-12, again, very competitive all around. I think it was Matt Berry that offered to FaceTime him. Like, hey, you want me to FaceTime you so you can watch the game? Like,
Matt Berry promoting
with the Pac-12 network.
Yeah, Matt Berry promoting a competitor. I don't think the suits at ESPN would respond so well to that, to promoting a competitor. But I guess with that note, another week of hardware is complete. I don't have anything to add. I'm just excited.
I do not. Excited for another great week of college football. It's going to be nice to have kind of a stress-free Saturday, right? I can just kind of sit back and relax now that I don't have Florida to worry about. So it'll be good.
Yeah, I mean,
And we'll see. Maybe going on the road, not taking the subway, figuring out some.
oh, it won't be the subway. It'll be the Metro North. It's a much more calm ride on the Metro North, not the subway.
It's all the same.
Subway's underground, Metro North. We
Or
both know
no,
the
no
drill.
one cares. It's all the same. It all sucks. There's rats on all of
Dang. I mean, Metro North goes to Connecticut. But anyway, I
them.
digress. I digress. But yeah, great weekend. So hopefully we both will be at games on site for hardware. For we call them site visits, but it's just us going to games. It's nothing special. It's not like game day. It's just us going to games. We're just trying to be
It's just
fancy.
us. They don't have any desk. There's no security or anything. Believe
No
me.
desk. Yeah. But yeah. But it's cool to dream, I guess. But yeah, I guess until next week, everyone. This has been fun, great as always. Until next time, everyone. Peace.